Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Hardly Millennial podcast, where we are young, dumb, and full of
Opinions, folks.
opinions, especially today, guys. So,
Today.
before we go, we'll just let you know I'm Adam, and across from me is Matthew.
Hi.
The same two that have been visiting you for the past 10 days. We're in double digits now.
Double digits, guys. That's exciting.
That is exciting.
We've made 10 of these things?
We have made 10 of these things. Well, this will be number 10.
Wow.
But yeah.
There we go. We're moving on up, dude.
Moving on up in the world. So, before we get into today's conversation, I think it's important that we give a little disclaimer here. So, our subject today is going to be politics,
God.
for the most part.
No, Adam, really?
It has to be, man. It's a hot topic right now. And this all stemmed from Trump declaring his state of emergency in regards to the border wall.
Daddy Trump did some things.
Daddy Trump did some things to piss people off. What else is new? So, look, we're just giving a disclaimer here that we are talking about this. We are young, dumb, and full of opinions, so that's exactly what you're getting from us.
Also, folks, we'll be approaching this a little bit differently than you would assume here. Mm-hmm. For the most part, I'm going to be kind of playing the devil's advocate today. So, Adam definitely has opinions going into today, and I have a remarkable lack of opinions. So we decided just to cover both sides of the field. I'm going to kind of pick Adam's brain and kind of approach it from the other side today.
Yeah, we'll just, we're going to try to not have a debate. It's just, a discussion. But, and politics is important to talk about, guys. I understand that it seems like the media is just so saturated with that. But this isn't a topic we talk about every day. And
well, nobody ever asks millennials how they feel.
That's true. That is
Right?
very true. They just assume.
So we're going to tell the world how we feel.
Exactly. And we have our phones and computer here with us, so we'll try to, make sure that nothing is miscited, but otherwise just kind of take what we say with a grain of salt and just enjoy listening. It'll be a good time.
All right. So how do we kick it off here, Adam? Let's see. So Trump declared a state of emergency this morning.
State of emergency, or I think it was on Friday that he did so. But yeah, I was just seeing articles about it today. And the thing so for those who may not know, there was the government shutdown that went for 30 some days, like over a month, a month and a half or something.
I think it was almost 2 months, bro.
Yeah. So, and the deal was that he would stop the state of emergency, but then within
he would stop the shutdown.
I'm sorry, yeah, the shutdown. But in 2 or 3 weeks' time after that, they had to come up with a way to get him the money for the border wall. Right. And Trump did say, if you don't give me the money, I'm going to use my presidential power to declare a state of emergency to get the money.
I do remember him saying it. I don't think anyone really believed him. Yeah, for the most part.
They should have believed him at this point. In his presidency, the man does stuff like that.
He said he was going to do it. He fought the good fight, I guess, for 2 months.
Yeah.
Realized that wasn't the right time for it. Mm-hmm. Gave in.
Yep.
Looked a little silly, I think. People were a little surprised, I think, that he gave in. I know I was. Usually he's not much of a give-in kind of guy.
You could argue on the other side, though, that Trump was being the bigger man and, ending the government shutdown because the Democrats weren't,
Well, it was getting rough for people, dude. You had everyone heard about the airports that were starting to shut down, the TSA agents, which are not exactly security, but they check you as you go through customs, things like that.
They're supposed to stop terrorists, but...
Yeah, they were not getting paid, man.
Nope.
Like, people who worked for, I don't think all parts, but certain parts of the government weren't getting paychecks.
Yeah.
And they didn't get 2 of them in a row.
It was actually anybody who had a government job, and then I believe halfway through... They let certain, because it was tax season, so they let certain government agencies like the IRS open back up. And the reason why the IRS was basically like, look, we have nothing to do with this border stuff.
Yeah, we're getting funding no matter what.
Yeah, so exactly. So, of course, we had to open them back up so that the government could get their money from the people. Meanwhile, the biggest government workers, the senators and the president and all of them were getting paid.
I do think that there was about a month into it, maybe a little sooner than that, there was a group of senators. I think mostly Republican senators,
Yeah.
who opted out of their pay.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to get a paycheck.
That's true. I do
which
remember
was
that.
so fine and dandy of them.
Oh yeah, doesn't really hurt them, but whatever. But anyway, so Trump declared his state of emergency on Friday, saying that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but saying that due to all the criminals and the drug traffickers and the human traffickers and murderers that come over to us from Mexico, not specifically from Mexico, but that's where they're entering from.
The Mexican-American border.
Are coming in from there is enough of an issue to be a state of emergency. And apparently people who work at the border agree with him.
So they're calling it an abuse of power.
Yes.
Right? They being
Nancy Pelosi and
Democrats.
Chuck Schumer, specifically in a joint statement, said it's an abuse of power.
Abuse of power. So he's kind of calling an emergency when it's not really an emergency, so he can get the money for the wall that's part of his platform, right? So they're calling it an abuse of power. They're probably going to sue him, is what's going to happen here. Trump's even said it.
So California, on that note, California started it. So they said a lawsuit for California against Trump is imminent. That one. And I believe there are 6 other states that jumped on board with that are all going. So the 7 states altogether are going to join together to sue the White House, essentially.
So I was just reading a little before the podcast here, trying to cram some information. He actually said that he fully expects to get sued, and that he expects to lose the lawsuit in the first 2 levels of court. So local court, and then I guess
whatever the next one is.
Federal court, state court, whatever. So then the 3rd level of court would be the Supreme Court, which has like the final say. So he actually wants it to go to the Supreme Court.
Well, at this point, he's chosen all of the... Does the president choose all the Supreme Court members, or is it just like as they retire and such?
I think as they retire, if you're the president, you choose the new ones.
Because I think he's appointed 3 Supreme Justices since he's been in office.
What, like 7?
Right? I think so, like 6 or 7. But again, guys, young, dumb, and full of opinions. We're not quite sure, but...
I think there's 7, bro. I think it's an odd number.
Yeah.
So there's no ties.
Okay, that's true.
Because once they say it, once the Supreme Court decides something, like that's the law of the land. Like everyone has to follow that.
And that's where you can argue with people saying that what he's doing is an abuse of power. It's, guys, declaring a national emergency is 100% in the law book that the president can do.
Well, it's not illegal. I actually have... right here is 1976. They created, the Supreme Court actually put together guidelines for stipulations of power on the president when he declares states of emergency.
Okay.
Meaning there is a rule book for it. You can't just be super willy-nilly. So Trump is claiming that he followed those rules.
Yeah.
And it's going to end up being 2 levels of court who will probably say he did not, and then the 3rd level, the Supreme Court, will have to decide if he followed the rules stated in 1976, or if he broke those rules, or if we need to change those rules. Maybe it's been, well, gosh, what is that, 40 years?
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to change the rules a little bit. But I do think I was reading that this is the first time since those rules have been put in place that a president is getting backfire for a state of emergency. Normally, when the president declares state of emergency, which has happened 46 times in our history, I believe I read.
I was actually just going to ask you, what are other state of emergencies that have been called?
I believe that the last one was probably Hurricane Katrina. I think that was a state of emergency because it was so bad. I think part of that is that it's so they can apply the National Guard to it so that they can help to clean up the damage and stuff.
But like something like Hurricane Katrina, though, I feel when a state of emergency was announced, that was something, it was no matter what side of the fence you were sitting on, like everybody was oh yeah, that's a state of emergency.
This is the first time since 1976 that it's had to go to, that he expects to get a lawsuit over it.
I see. So what was the last time there was like such a gray area about a state of emergency?
I think that they put it together. I think it was Truman I was reading. President Truman had some issues with something. I don't know what his state of emergency was, but I think that was the president that they that was in power at the time that they made those new rules.
Oh, gotcha. He did something to. I was like,
I have no idea,
Little
guys.
shady, Truman.
Let me know if you know.
Yeah, let us know in the comments. So,
So it's not against the law, as far as we know, for him to do this.
yeah, exactly. And we've talked about this before. And basically, if the president says something as an emergency, or the president says something as a law, for the most part, it's okay. Well, that's.
Well, did
That's
you
true
know
now.
that's actually so true that it goes deeper? So a president cannot be charged for like treason, for like giving away like national security secrets, because as soon as the words pass the lips of the president, as soon as he speaks them, it's declassified.
Right.
Like just the act of him saying it declassifies it.
Right.
So he cannot give away classified information. It's impossible.
Interesting.
It's really interesting, actually.
Yeah.
The
But then it
president
makes
doesn't
you
go to
won-
jail.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much shit though is kept from our presidents because of that fact right there.
Well, I think the hard part is that you can't. You have to tell the president everything.
But you don't think that there's stuff that goes deep into the government where there's some groups that are like, really? You think the president really knows everything?
I think that the president is literally that serious. The chair of the president is you're the leader of the world.
Right.
I mean, you're the leader of America, but really, you're the leader of the world.
Right.
So yeah, that guy knows everything. That's why everyone was so afraid when Trump got elected.
Because he thought he was just gonna.
He was going to give away all the secrets, not know how to conduct himself.
Right.
So far, I don't know, he's done all right, I guess.
I mean, he hasn't
yeah,
told us anything that's like,
we're still America.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We're
exactly.
doing okay.
We're doing fine.
But yeah, that's why everyone was so afraid. They have like the Situation Room.
Right.
Is a real thing. So like during the time when we were fighting in Iraq real hard, if the shit goes down, if like a helicopter falls out of the sky, right? And there's like 3 Navy SEALs that are fucking trapped behind enemy lines, they wake the president up for that.
Right.
They'll be like, Mr. President, this is going on. Here's 3 different things we can do. Pick one.
Right.
So the president doesn't come up with the ideas, but he totally chooses which idea we're going to follow.
Yeah.
And sometimes that gets him a little bit of, negative feedback.
Yeah. Well, these days it just depends what side of the fence that president sits on.
Literally.
But yeah, literally.
So it's interesting, actually, this border wall thing. Me and Adam, the millennials here, we live in Arizona.
Yeah.
And we're not as southern Arizona as you can get.
I mean, we're
about right in the middle.
Pretty southern.
About in the middle.
It's maybe 2.5 hour drive to the Mexican border.
Well, and I grew up, actually, my hometown is a city called Tucson, Arizona, which is basically the largest city closest to
the border. Yeah.
So we have a little bit of insight on what it's like to live around these parts.
Yeah.
And, Adam, have you ever had any cases or instances in your life where someone deemed as an illegal immigrant has wronged you or hurt you in any way?
No, I've never been in a position where.
That was a quick no.
Yeah, well, it's never happened.
It's just literally never happened.
But I will say that growing up, things that did bother me was I did go to school with some people who were, I don't want to call them Mexican because we do get a lot of illegal immigrants from like Latin America also.
Right.
That, come up through Mexico. But, these, I'd have friends who were like Latino or Hispanic who were illegal. They specifically weren't, but their parents came over here with them, right?
I also have had friends in that case, yes.
And and it's really angered me sometimes because I've had some of them literally talk trash about America and be like, I wish I didn't. I had one girl in a photography class I took once who was telling me like she wishes she didn't live here or like come here,
Was it because America had wronged her or her family?
I didn't really get specifics, but she did mention that it wasn't her choice to come over here, it was her parents' choice.
Right.
And when I hear things like that irks me because I'm just like, because first of all, my immediate response is like, well then, you'll have the chance to go back then, you will be 18 soon enough and you can go back then.
Right.
And 2, it's like, don't you think your parents, only had not only their, but your best interests at heart when coming over here? Do you really think they'd go through that?
I think a lot of them, I think most of the cases are because of children.
Yeah.
Not to say it's the children's fault or anything, but
no.
it's because the parents want the children to have a better life
Yeah.
than they did, which is totally, in my opinion, justified. 100%. Every single person in their right mind who has kids wants their kid to have a better life than they did.
Exactly. And you know what? And I have also met a lot of I've had a lot of friends who are Mexican whose families were illegal immigrants, and they were great people. It wasn't like they were trying to hold. I mean, they held on to their culture, but for the most part, they were assimilated to America. And a lot of the times too, the only reason why, from my experiences, the only reason why they were even here illegal is because they were here on a visa. The visa expired and they just never left.
Right.
And I've even actually had friends where their parents would have to get separated because there would be a dad whose visa, got expired and he had to go back to Mexico. Meanwhile, the mother stays here with the kid and they do that. And that's pretty heartbreaking to see a friend go through.
I actually had a close friend in middle school. And her mother was found to be here illegally and actually got in trouble. They came to their house and arrested the mom. And they actually sent her mom back to Latin America. I don't think they were from Mexico. I think they were from more South America.
Right.
But they actually deported her back to the country that they came from. And the dad got to stay, but the dad ended up leaving, running away because he didn't have his wife anymore and he didn't want to raise my friend by himself.
Right.
So my friend ended up losing both of her parents over it. And went and lived with an aunt who, was good to her and whatnot. But it's interesting because before this happened, she was very outgoing, very bubbly, a Disney person. You know, everything's happy-go-lucky, regular kid. We're in middle school, you know. And after this happened, the next year we came back, she was very dark. She was very... wearing a lot of black makeup, got very into the emo scene kind of scene. Yeah. And I mean, that could just be teenage angst.
Sure.
Maybe she would have got there either way. I'm not blaming anyone. But it's interesting that right after something like that out of her power happened, it literally changed her character. She became like a different person after that.
I mean, hell, divorces fuck kids up. I can't imagine when it's against the parents' will.
And then how do you expect that child to grow up and be a functioning member of the society that ruined her life?
Right.
In her brain, whether it's right or wrong, in her brain, you got to think that she blames America for ruining her family.
Yeah.
Because they came to her house, they knocked on her door, and they took her mom away.
Right.
Right? You're a kid, man. You're 12. You're not thinking about politics. You're not thinking about laws. You love your mom, and there are these people in suits taking her away.
And
you're going to grow up to be fucked up.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I definitely understand how something like that, and just as you said, somebody who's young who doesn't really understand politics or what's really happening, all you see is what's happening in front of you, and you can only make inferences from that. But at the same time, I feel like there comes this point when... Because, I mean, obviously you and I, it doesn't sound like we've had really any bad experiences with anybody who's been illegal.
I haven't. No one's I've never been robbed on the street or attacked.
And nor have I. But at the same time, if you're going to come into a kind, even us, if we were to go just, put up tent in a country of our choosing, even if that country was predominantly a white like us.
If we went to France, it was like, hey, we're just going to live here now.
You have to know that you're going in there with the risk that at some point this can happen.
And I think that for all these cases, the risk literally... The reward outweighs the risk.
Well, it has to.
Even if they get 2 years in America, it's the greatest 2 years of their life.
Well, exactly. And that's
we don't
why
understand
people keep doing
what it is to live with nothing.
No.
I mean, poor people here are rich people anywhere else, dude.
Right.
It's incredible.
Well, having said all this, how do you specifically feel then about, and I know you're going to play devil's advocate through this, but
Sure.
just genuine, how does Matthew feel about the border wall and all that?
Okay, so Matthew has changed a lot in the last year.
Okay.
So about a year ago, I was very much on the side of we should not build walls. Not necessarily we should build bridges. I wasn't quite like that high in the sky.
Right.
Okay. But I was like, walls are so medieval. You know, like what is a wall really gonna keep out? Come on now. Like we're not throwing rocks at each other anymore. Right. And then one day I was in the backyard and I was smoking a cigarette and I was looking around for things to take a picture of for Instagram. And I started to notice all these walls around me in the backyard, that the backyard is literally surrounded by walls. And then I got to thinking, holy shit, every single house that you can think of has a wall around their backyard to separate them from their neighbor. And usually they put up a wall in their front yard too. They'll put a fence up or something in their front yard.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe it's not to keep your neighbor out. Maybe it's to keep pests out, animals, bugs. Maybe you have a small tree that needs shade from the weather.
Right.
You know, whatever it is. And in that moment, it just made me think, walls are very much a part of our human psyche.
Yes.
We use walls to mark barriers because you can't just paint a line on the ground. No one is going to listen to that. No one is going to walk right over it.
Right.
You literally build a structure and it just marks the edge of your territory. And every single time they build that structure, they have a thing called a gate that's in there. Usually there's a lot of them. And it lets people pass from one side of the wall to the other side of the wall.
Right.
Right? So if you want those people to come in, they can come right on in. If you want to leave, you can open it up and leave.
Right.
So it's not like this permanent barrier that is, there's going to be gates in the wall.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's going to be ways.
So
it's almost more symbolic than it is actually.
it's 100%
Yeah.
symbolic. It does nothing to actually protect or you could run a tank through it in 5 seconds. It'd be easy.
Right.
You know what I mean? But what it does is it builds up this state of mind of we are prideful of our side of the wall. You're prideful of your side of the wall. Let's make our sides better so that we enjoy being on them.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know. Just noticing it in the backyard totally changed my philosophy on the border wall.
Well, and it always goes back to the biggest argument I've heard people who are for the border wall make to people who are against it is, and I'm sure you've heard this argument too, of, well, just let a stranger into your house. You know, it's like the stranger could be super nice, super kind,
Absolutely.
hardworking, but stranger may not also be those things too.
The thing is, you don't know who they are, and it's not our fault. Our brain is programmed to fear things we don't understand,
Right.
or to be cautious of things that we don't understand,
Right.
Because if you fuck up once and die, you're done. You only get one shot,
Right.
So your brain has to be as careful as it can be,
Right.
to keep you safe, right? Do you think? I just had a little idea because if we build a wall, it works for our side, but it also works for their side too, right? Mexico
Right.
gets a wall as well, a free one actually. 'Cause if we pay for it, then they still get the benefits of the structure.
Right.
Do you think that having no idea, having never gone to Mexico or met any of the native people, do you think that they would appreciate having a secure structure at the edge of their territory?
I mean, my first instance is to answer no, simply because there's obviously not a problem of Americans escaping America to go to Mexico. I mean,
Right.
hell, even when Trump was elected, you had so many actors who are from Mexico, you know, or,
Right.
you know, have a second home there or whatever it is, say that they're going to go back and move to Mexico. And I think George Lopez is the only one who actually followed through with that,
Well, it's kind of our beach, right? We go there and we party and we have fun. And then
yeah,
we come back.
absolutely. So
It's just what's done.
And as far as what the people in Mexico think, I think so. First of all, I think most of the immigrants are not from Mexico. I believe they're mostly from Central America, and I believe it just comes to who you ask. You know, if you ask a middle class Mexican family that lives in suburbia and stuff, they probably may not have much of an opinion on it. Whereas like somebody who lives in nothing and just dreams about going to America just sees it as a harder way for them to get there now. And I mean, and I'm assuming that's really just the gray areas because, I mean, maybe we just need to redo the immigration process of how easy it is to get into the country or how hard it might be to get into the country. But at the same time, I've known people now, specifically not, these aren't Mexican or Hispanic people, but I have known people from England or Europe, or I knew somebody from Greenland once who were trying to come over to America and going through that immigration process.
So white people,
Yeah,
Anglo-American,
white
right?
people, white people. Okay. And so I don't know if that plays part in it. That's just
anybody
I've
just
known.
an observation.
Yeah, that's just everybody I've known, and who were going through this process, and the thing is, they were over here. They're living here. They were reaping the benefits of America and not being a citizen, but they were going through the process. So, and when you're going, from my understanding, when you're going through the process, you're given this visa so that you can work here and live here.
My mom went through it.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
mom literally immigrated here when she was 18. She lived in France. She still has citizenship in France. She's dual citizen. And actually, I brought it up a little bit on one of the first podcasts, and she listened to it, and she had to call me to correct me. I think I'd said that it took her about a year to do it. I was wrong. It took her almost 5 years.
Okay.
But
she was able to live here, though.
She was able to live here and work here. She had she used the word green card because she's old school. I think now it's called a work visa or something like that. Shit. Back in the day, it was literally a card and the background was green. And that's just what people called it, was the green. I don't know if that's a intolerant term now or not. But yeah, she had one of those. So she was able to work here. She had children. Obviously, me and my sister are both American citizens.
Right.
Because if you're born on the soil, regardless of where your parent came from, you're a citizen.
Right.
All you got to do is make it here. But it wasn't like that. She wasn't like trying to get us smuggled in, like have her kids in America.
Right.
She was here for years, got pregnant, and then had us.
Right. But that's my point, though. So if these people who are trying to get legal status here are able to be here, live here, reap the benefits of America while they're going through that process, and then become a citizen and basically just continue on their life the way that they were.
Productive member of society. She worked for schools. She worked for the local school system.
Right.
Educated kids.
So with all that being said, why this coming over illegally? Is it just a money thing? I'm assuming it's not a cheap process. Is that why people just constantly come over here illegally? Is it just the money thing?
I think it has to do with, I mean, think about the countries we're talking about here. My mom came from France. Mm-hmm. We're talking about immigrants coming from Latin America.
Right.
There's a big difference in the poverty levels from Western Europe and South America.
Right.
Also, there's a very, very large ocean between Western Europe and the United States.
Right.
Where there is a land bridge that is Mexico between South America and North America.
Right.
So it's the difference of having to fly or swim or get on a ship and the difference of just having to walk.
Touche.
It's a lot easier to walk somewhere.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but
now where
right.
Europe has issues, I do believe, is from places who have seen a lot of trauma due to the wars in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Like Syria, for example. A lot of Syrian refugees in the last few years got up and just started walking towards Germany.
And Germany just welcomed them with open arms, didn't they?
Well, the first 10,000 of them. But there was 1 million people who walked. So, yeah, the first 10,000, they opened our arms and let them in. And what did they do immediately after that? They put up gates. Mm-hmm. They put up fences. They put up gates. And every country between Syria and Germany, Macedonia, Turkey, all that, they put up gates. And they put up security guards. Because you can't let 1 million of anything move around without keeping an eye on it.
Yeah.
You can't have 1 million bats fly through the sky and not go, what's going on with those? That's a lot of something in one area.
Right.
So humans are the same way. I mean, 1 million people, That's the size of the armies they used in World War II to attack each other.
It's the size of some cities.
The Battle of the Bulge, you're talking about 1 million people on each side. It's a huge amount of people.
Right.
And they're just walking at them. So you got to think, these people got to eat. These people got to shit. Where are they pooping?
Yeah.
Where are they throwing their trash? Where are they're fucking on the way. They're getting pregnant. They're having babies. Who's taking care of these people? If 100 of them die in one day in your country, are you responsible for that?
Well, and that's what I think people don't understand about the immigration problems happening here is that, I mean, now don't get me wrong, we don't have 1 million people walking.
Right.
You know, but
that was exaggerated.
Right. No.
But there's a lot.
But there is a lot. And when they come in here, when they have babies and when they need housing and need to get on welfare, you know, that's why I think bothers most of the people. It's like, whereas I'm working hard for my money, you're giving people welfare. And I know that people can use the argument of like, well, they're not given a lot or da. It's like, look, I used to work at Walmart and I used to help little Mexican ladies who couldn't even speak English, who would be with 5 of their kids and they'd have WIC that they'd be paying with food cars and WIC. And then I'd help them take their stuff out to their car and they're driving like a Mercedes or an Audi or like just some really nice car. And it's like, well, how are you getting that if you're using WIC and food stamps? And...
If you're getting $500 a month in aid, okay, which is a very small number, how could you possibly live on $500?
Right.
Well, think of it this way. I have a minimum wage job.
Right.
Okay, I make minimum wage. If I work 40 hours a week, roughly, give or take a little bit here and there, you're making about $1,000 a month that you actually see in your hand to pay your bills with. So it's the mindset of people don't think about 500 is so little, it's hardly anything. They think of that's half of what I make, and I work 160 hours a month to get that.
Right, it's a glass half empty, half full kind of
full thing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to put yourself in these people's situations when A, you've never been anywhere close to that position.
Right.
So you have no idea what it feels like. And B, you feel that you've built up a good life for yourself. And if you can do it, other people should be able to do it too.
Well, and what people don't understand is when you have people like you or I who have never really been affected by any illegal immigrant, right? You know, negatively at least. And so obviously we're going to have views that are a little more moderate about it because it's just nothing that's really been a problem.
If I would have been
in our
mugged,
own
if
life.
me and my mom would have got mugged on the side of the street when I was 6 years old, I probably would have grew up to have a much different opinion on border security.
And that's just it. I just saw a video yesterday actually where there was this mother that was in front of her own city capital, whatever city she was in, and they were basically, I don't know if you would call it a protest, but they were basically saying like, we want the wall, right?
Right, it was a statement. They were making a statement.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And she was reading this poem that, you know, it was like something her son liked or whatnot because her son was killed by an illegal immigrant from Mexico.
Okay, so she had a very passionate view on it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as she's reading that, you had anti-Trumpers who were walking by and just yelling, fuck Trump, fuck you, fuck da, while this woman is like crying, reading this poem for her dead son. And that's what we're missing. It's this understanding that like, look, of course you may feel differently about it if all of your friends are illegal immigrants and they're all great people, but to this young mother here who had a son that it was a good kid and
changed her life,
and then died because an illegal immigrant came over and killed him, like, you have to understand where those people are coming from also.
And the people yelling, fuck Trump, they are so proud of themselves because they're practicing their American right of free speech. And it's a naughty free speech, right? Because you're really pushing the lines. You're saying, fuck the leader.
You're poking somebody.
Right, so you're really making a statement. But what they're missing is that woman reading the poem out loud has just as much of a right to express her views and her opinions. And she is only practicing her free speech as well. So by tearing down her free speech, you're not giving any more credibility to your own.
Right, exactly.
You're tearing down your own free speech as well.
And that's why, and I think that's what's happening right now with the Democratic Party is because usually the term social justice warrior is associated with the far left.
I do. I think of
And
blue.
that's-
I think of the Democrat. Now, that may not be at all what it is or was meant to be, but that's what people think.
Oh,
people my age,
absolutely.
that's what we think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kills me because just as you said, it's everybody exercising their right to free speech, but at the same time, it's these same people who are, yelling fuck Trump and practicing their free speech who are then telling other people you can't say those things about those kind of people or you can't do this. And they're trying to censor people is essentially what they're doing.
Well, that's a slippery slope. That's one other thing I did want to touch on is, we were saying that we've never been affected by any kind of illegal immigrant crime.
Right.
Okay. And I did just want to touch on that. I grew up in Tucson. Okay. And while I was rather privileged, okay, my parents both were middle class. They both worked. So we had more money than probably 60% of the people who lived in Tucson. We were in the upper 40% of Tucson.
Okay.
So the areas of town that I lived in were predominantly white. Okay, we'll just cut to the chase there. They were predominantly white, and they were predominantly higher income.
Okay.
So I feel that probably played a big role in why I never encountered any kind of crime growing up, whether it be illegal immigrant or not. I just didn't encounter a lot of crime, period.
Right.
Now, I do know from growing up there and going to high school in Tucson and going out with friends, there are parts of Tucson that you just don't go to unless you were born there. For instance, there's a place called Hollywood Boulevard in Tucson.
Oh, really?
There really is. You don't go to Hollywood unless you were born there because you just don't. It's just known. There are people who live there and run that place, and they don't like people from the outside.
Gotcha.
There are a few places in Tucson, like Midvale Park, things like that, where even the police don't really venture to. It's just kind of known that certain things happen in those areas, and as long as they stay in those areas, it's okay. We just don't want it to go anywhere else in the town. So it may be a little bit unfair for someone with my point of view to argue that illegal immigration or crime in general doesn't really happen to a lot of people.
I definitely understand that way of thinking, but I argue the other side of saying it's completely fair because you can't that's the issue. It's like you can't say, hey, like in terms of like illegal immigration, it's like you can't say, oh, these group of people can't vote on the issue or have no say in the issue because they're not from there or they're not a part of it or they didn't experience
That is true,
it.
Everyone gets the same say here.
What we have to be able to do is instead of just yelling fuck you to each other, is at least try to get people to understand each other's side. One issue I think our generation really struggles with just because of growing up with social media and technology is nobody knows how to talk to anybody anymore.
Absolutely not. Yeah, I agree.
What happens when you talk to somebody now, and I venture anybody out here, when you're having a conversation with somebody in person who might be a little younger, like pay attention to this. Most people are not having a conversation while the other person is talking. They're automatically thinking, how am I going to respond to this?
And they don't even listen to
And
what
they
the person's
don't even
saying.
listen to what the person is saying. And there were even times I've noticed me doing this. And when I heard that particular statement about how people do this a lot, I really made an effort to sit down and listen to people and then respond to whatever it is they say. And trust me, guys, you will have much more meaningful conversations from doing that. But I think it's just become this habit of people just thinking about how they're going to respond because that's what happens with text messaging, right? You get a text message,
Absolutely.
you get 5 minutes or however long you need to take to think about your response, and you can write an essay, delete some of it, write a new part of it.
But make that person talk to someone face to face you have to say more of what you really believe.
Right.
Because
So
it's got to roll quickly.
so we've taken those habits and we've applied it to real conversation, and that's why you have such this pushback right now with social justice warriors who are usually more millennial and Generation Zers compared to the older generations, the baby boomers, and even a lot of the Gen Xers, I would argue, because there's
Oh, yeah.
just a different age of how to have a conversation. Whereas we're just like, fuck you, like this is wrong, how dare you?
It gets defensive right away.
I mean, you said it yourself at one point. A lot of people lead their arguments with or their decisions with emotion instead of logic and fact anymore.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we're losing touch with logic and fact. So all we
Yes.
have left is emotion.
Well, that's the argument, isn't it? We're at this point we're arguing over definitions of words anymore. It's
Right.
It's you can't say that because it doesn't mean this. Well, it meant that 5 years ago. Like like what the hell are we doing? But
So, with all that being said, the next presidential elections are coming up right around the corner here.
Yeah.
We're only about about a year away from it?
well, yeah, we'll be talking a lot about it when it gets
Well-
closer, I'm sure.
With all these things in mind, I mean, gosh, it's hard to say it now so far out, but what are you looking for in the next president? What would you like to see done a little bit differently? Assuming it's even the same guy, what would you like to just see happen?
I would like to see somebody. I would like a president who's progressive, but aware of what's happening in the world. And I don't think you have that right now. So there's actually a particular presidential candidate that I've been following a little bit, and it's super early in the game, so these opinions about this man could definitely change later down the road.
Right.
But there's this gentleman named, I believe his name is Andrew Yang, and he's announced his nomination for the 2020 presidential elections, and I believe he's running on the Democratic side.
Okay.
But he's running on the platform of universal basic income. And for those out there who don't know what that is, that basically just means that anybody over the age of 18 can opt in to get a certain amount of money every month just from the government. Here you go.
Oh, okay.
So-
like universal welfare.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thing.
So now there have been other people who have argued this point before. They're usually deemed socialist, this, that, and the other thing, which it is. It is kind of a socialist move. But when he was explaining his reasoning behind it, it drew me in more because he sounded like somebody who just understood it's not about moving in a socialist direction. It's about looking at the change of what's happening in our society and adjusting what we need to adjust for it. So his reasoning for it was he was talking about how 50% of Americans work in either the retail establishment,
Right.
They work in
Which is generally lower wage right now.
lower wage right now. They usually work in, I can't remember what.
Service.
Customer service, specifically things like call centers is what he was talking about. So
Oh, like telecommunications.
telecommunications, there you go. So telecommunications and transportation. So bus drivers, truckers being the biggest percentage of that.
Actually makes total
area.
sense. I can agree with that.
But he was talking about how 50% of Americans work in those sectors.
Half of us.
Half of us.
Wow.
And those are all going to be the jobs are going to be automated by 2030.
Oh, well, absolutely. I can totally agree with
Absolutely,
that. So
yeah.
half of us are in for a little bit of trouble if we
Exactly.
don't figure something out.
Exactly. So he was talking about within those, because of those kind of changes happening, and there was more he talked about too, but those are some of the biggest things he touched on, to where having something like a universal basic income for people, he was using the example of $1,000.
Right.
And he goes, and what people don't understand is $1,000 isn't enough for somebody to live off of. He goes, but what it acts as a cushion. And he was also talking about to where now if you're getting government welfare, and let's say that you're getting $700 from the government in welfare every month, you wouldn't get $1,000 on top of that. You'd get $300 until it got
get
up
you
to
to the
1,000. Yeah. So he was talking about going through that process, and then he was talking about, well, Alaska does it. They use what they tax for fuel because they have the pipelines through there,
Right.
and they give that money back to the people, and they've been doing that for 37 years. He goes, once all these jobs start become automated, he goes, that's what you tax, and that's what you use to give back to the people, like Alaska did it with their fuel.
Well, even companies do it. If you invest in a company, if you
They'll
buy
get back to
stock,
you.
a lot of them have a thing called dividends, and that is just for owning a piece of the company, owning a stock. They give you money for that.
Yeah,
They pay you based
exactly.
on, and if they make a lot of money that year, the dividends will be more.
Yeah.
If they lose money, sometimes they don't pay a dividend at all.
Yeah, exactly.
America kicks ass though. As if we were a company, not a country, we're like the richest company in the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we could probably pay some dividends and be okay.
But to go back to your question in regards to like what I'd like to see from a president, I've really liked what I've seen from him specifically, just because you're giving these policies that some people might, at first glance look at it as like, oh, this is a socialist thing, this isn't going to be good, it's a slippery slope, but it's met by, I understand what's happening in the world. Other people need to be aware of this, and we need to adjust. Otherwise, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
You know who I want?
Who?
I don't know what their name is, but I know they exist out there. I want the best chess player in America.
Really?
Whoever is our master chess player who like kicks everyone's ass in America, I want that guy to be the president.
I would want...
Because I want a president who thinks like 7 moves ahead.
I think that would be a good candidate for... who's the... God, I can't think of this role right now. The guy that General Mattis has this role right now in Trump's cabinet. The guy who's like a head of the military part of it. Like I know Trump is technically a head of the military.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm trying to think of it.
But anyways, that position is somebody who has to do a lot with running the military. I would want like a chess player, I think. Honestly, I really like...
No, I won't.
No?
Well, I mean, with that being said, the president is the commander in chief.
Right.
He is in charge of the
I
military.
guess, yeah, that's true. But I would actually like to see... I actually like the fact of having a businessman as president. I don't think maybe Trump was maybe the best choice as far as businessmen are concerned.
But Howard Schultz.
But I don't like Howard
Businessman?
Schultz. Businessman,
You don't like Howard
sure.
Schultz or you don't like Starbucks?
I don't like his politics. So, like, for example, I don't like the way that he handled that situation where there were the 2 young black men who were kicked out for loitering, and he decided to do a company-wide, like, racist...
Yeah, it's a company policy, though. It wouldn't be an actual American policy.
well, I don't know.
He had to save face for his company.
Yeah, but I would worry that he would be like people like a lot on the Democratic side who would give in to those social justice warrior values to stay ahead of the game in his own party. Because he would probably...
I think he'd be super clean energy. I think that would be like, he would dream about clean energy every night.
And I would love those things too. But unfortunately, as much as I wish those were the hot topics right now, the hot topics is social politics and identity politics. And that's what we need somebody to kind of go in there and diffuse right now. And I don't think that's somebody who would diffuse it. I feel like he would just add fire to it. And I think that's dangerous with the current.
Well, they have a
climate.
saying called "fight fire with fire."
Yeah, that's true. I mean, who knows? We might get surprised, but no, I just think that we need somebody in there. So like when I was talking about a businessman, this particular guy Andrew Yang is an entrepreneur. So for like the
cool.
past like 27 years, he's just like, he's done this, he's raised money for this and this and this and this. So I don't know, I think having a businessman is really important to have in there. And regardless of what people think of Trump, he is a businessman that has made billions upon billions on his businesses. And of course, some of it's shady. Businessmen are always going to be a little shady. But
Is that okay
money.
to just accept though? Like,
No, I mean,
because
that's a good
I agree
question.
with you, and I
Yeah.
think most people agree with you. Oh, business is just a little shady.
Right.
Isn't that an issue just
Well,
right there?
it's an issue between...
George Washington was a businessman. He owned plantations.
It's
shady.
definitely a gray area, because you also have to then look at it of like, because there are some shady business deals that are made, but it's not against the law. So then you have to ask yourself, what's more important? Is it more important to live by moral values and dictate your decisions off of that when you're in a position like like the CEO of a business or president of the United States? Or do you have to lead and just make sure, well, as long as it's in the power of the law?
Well, I would say that you're the one who has to sleep at night. So
Yeah.
whatever you're okay with, I guess that's how far you can take
Yeah.
it, right?
I mean, I personally, like this particular company, I, want to run off of, moral value. Obviously stay within the law too, but, live,
you just change the law. That's the
still,
beauty of the law.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you're outside of it, you just change it.
But you just run it as
That's why
morally
morals
correct.
are so important, in my opinion.
Yes.
It's because laws come and go and change, and they ebb and flow with time.
Yes.
Morals, you come out of the womb with those. You ask a kindergartner, is it okay to do X, Y, Z? And they'll go, yes or no.
Right.
Because you just know inside what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, and that's what really bothers me about today's political climate. And going back to like the mother who's reading this poem and had people walking by, yelling "fuck Trump" on the top of their lungs while she's reading this poem for her kid,
Right.
her dead kid.
Yeah.
And it's like people have now graded that area of like, well, it's within the law for me to do so. Yeah, but it makes you an asshole, and that's
yeah,
not
but
okay.
morally it's fucking wrong.
Yeah.
And I guess that it's such a double-edged sword because it's a beautiful thing to have that choice.
Yes.
I would hate to not have that choice. That's freedom, right?
Yes,
Is
of
being able to
course.
make choices. And I mean, so many people have died for that, blah, blah, blah. We all know the story. Freedom is not free, and we're all super thankful for it.
Right.
But you should practice some humility too.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Right.
Humility, compassion, kindness.
Aren't we still humans?
Exactly. And you can't just the amount of people that get offended over the kind of stuff that they get offended about anymore also, like things like gender specific pronouns and stuff like that too, right? It's just, I don't know.
How do you feel about like the eye for an eye concept? Like, do you think that those people who yell "fuck you" or "fuck Trump" to the lady while she's reading her poem, do you think that she should be entitled to like smack them in the face or throw a rock at them or be like, "Here's how I feel, now you feel it too"?
No, for the most part, I believe you should always kill them with kindness. I do believe there is a time and a place for violence and anger and those types of feelings and actions.
But is an eye for an eye just? Is that justice?
I guess at a very base level, yes.
It makes you feel better, doesn't it?
Well, some would argue that it doesn't. There are stories all the time of people seeking revenge, get that revenge, and then just feel horrible after it. It's just, not what
True.
they think, right? But no, I am a big advocate of kill them with kindness. I do believe that you have to lead by example. And if you lead saying like, oh, it's okay to just hit somebody when they do this, and that's just what everybody's going to do. And that isn't progression. That's going back to the caveman days, because that is how we used to solve things.
Well, that was the first code of law.
That was the first code of law.
Hammurabi.
Absolutely.
Carved him on a column or whatever.
Yeah.
It was literally like the first time mankind developed laws. That's
Yeah.
what they were. They were, if you wrong me, I get to wrong you equally.
And there are still some countries that practice those kind of beliefs.
Do they have less crime?
I actually think they have more crime. Because I think the Middle East is a place that they still strongly believe in that kind of stuff.
I think an eye for an eye would work, assuming that all criminals were only doing crimes for fun and pleasure.
Yes.
So if they just got a kick out of being criminals, then an eye for an eye works.
Right.
But if you're taking someone who stole bread because they're starving, and you try and tell them, "I'm going to cut your fingers off because you still have bread," now you've just taken my bad situation that got me to make this choice, and you've now put me backwards even more.
Well,
now I'm in a worse position, and you're going to expect me not to steal again. Now I'm hungry, and I only have one hand.
Well, and not only that, so let me do this hypothetical here. I saw this video once where the eye for an eye thing was put into action, right, with a child.
Oh, nice.
And
It poked his eye out?
Well, it was similar to what you said. So this kid stole bread or some food from somewhere or something like that. So their way of punishing the kid was they put down this towel on the ground and he put his arm on the towel, and then somebody slowly drove a car over his arm to break his arm.
Ow.
Yeah.
That's a
So
fucked up way to do it.
that was the punishment. So, but now here we go. Here's what this issue causes. So everybody looked at that point of this child stole food. We break his arm to make sure he doesn't do it again. Now, maybe the kid doesn't do it again. But then let's say later on, somebody deems it some kid does something very innocent like, and now that child as an adult deems, well, because he did that, it's my right to run over his arm with a car. So that's where you're getting into the gray areas, is because of how people wrong each other and what's right and wrong. In a lot of cases, in a lot of smaller cases, is opinion based. So some people would argue, especially in today's political climate, well, he called me a bad name, so I was in my complete right to punch him in the face. Is that eye for an eye?
No.
But they might argue it is.
No, you'd have to call him a bad name. That'd be eye for an eye.
But that's exactly why, though, that I don't think eye for an eye works. And I think that's how we get to the points that we are at now, is because everything's opinion-based. Now people are saying that words are just as bad as actions. If I say something violent towards you but don't actually do anything violent towards you, there are those out there that would argue, well, that's violence. So now I get to retaliate using violence, and hitting is another form of violence.
Oh, it's the most basic form.
So
we love it.
So therefore, it's eye for an eye and it's equal. That's the slippery slope. Whereas if you lead by example, whereas kill them with kindness, and you show people who are mean to you and you show kindness back to them, you might not get immediate results. Actually, I'll tell you right now, you won't. But those are the things that stick with people more. Those are the things that people go like, oh, wow, this guy did this to him, but he just responded like this. And I think that's how people end up paying
being
it
the
forward.
bigger person, kind of like that's why they call it that.
Exactly.
Because you had the right to do something, but you chose to practice control and not do it. Because
when you act out emotionally, then there comes this point of, and we've seen this happen all the time too, where somebody tells you not to do something and then you don't, and then they do it. And you're like, well, fuck you. I'm just going to do it this. Now it becomes this slippery slope. Whereas if you're the bigger person and you just don't do it and you conduct yourself the way that you're supposed to, people are going to follow your example, not the other person's.
And it's almost like it never fails. Think about Martin Luther King, Gandhi, anyone who practices a peaceful self-restraint, there's no way to beat that.
And the reason why people don't practice it more is because...
Well, it's hard. It takes a long time. You don't see immediate satisfaction.
It is the amount of time that it takes for it to pay off, but it always pays off more than doing it the other way. But we as humans, we like immediate satisfaction. It's why we like drugs. It's why you and I smoke. People want that dopamine rush, and you can get a really nice dopamine rush by finishing something you've been working on for months, or you can get it by, hitting somebody in the face.
Isn't it crazy? The brain like that.
Oh, we just want the easy way out.
Just the path of least resistance is the thing. I think your brain has so many trials and tribulations through its lifetime that it just wants to cut as many corners as it can.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that the fact that the best things are things that you wait for and have to work hard for just goes to show that, path of least resistance is just that. It's just the path of least resistance. But
it's not the best path.
But if you want the pot of gold, you're going to have to go down the one with the obstacles.
It's true. No matter what situation you put that in, it works.
But the difference is you're either going to get a pot of gold or you're going to get nothing.
50-50, right?
50-50, So it just
goodness.
I know, it just comes down to, even when it's hard, do your best to be kind to people, do your best not to be an asshole. And I've only heard of it paying off in the end. It may not happen for a long time, but I've never heard of it just not paying off at all. And people
you heard it here, folks.
And people who say it doesn't, well, you didn't do it long enough.
Kindness and patience seems to be the best answer.
I think so, at least. I do.
Well, I'm pretty surprised to say that I think that we survived the political conversation.
We survived the political conversation.
I didn't think it was going to happen, Adam. I was worried. I was like, this is our last podcast we're ever going to make.
I was a little worried too. When we were trying to think of subjects, and I was going through different news articles, and I kept seeing, I've seen for the past few days Trump's border wall thing, popping up.
There's always something. Something.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys liked this, let us know, because we could do this every day. There's always something in the news.
Oh, just wait until we have Justin on one of these days.
Oh, God.
You guys will love him and his opinions on the subject of politics. But so there's a little teaser for you.
But we have to keep Justin on a little, not a leash, but like there's a child gate up around Justin.
We just understand what Justin means. Sometimes we just expect other people not to quite understand sometimes with the way
You'll get a
he
taste
words
of it
things.
one day,
You'll
guys.
get a taste of it one day. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I'm excited to see what we'll talk about tomorrow. Again, you can follow us on all the social media platforms. We still have the GoFundMe going, www.gofundme.com/Hardly Millennial. We'll also have this on SoundCloud for you to listen to. Like, comment, and subscribe. And if you made it through this, there's a video coming soon. Just saying.
We're getting through it, guys. We're working on it. It's in its. Will we say it's in the finishing stages? Almost there.
Final touches.
The next couple days, guys.
All right. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Have a lovely day.
Bye.